Thank you, SACPA, for the invitation to join you today. I'm delighted to be here with Steve Hypolite. We've had close connection with the Commonwealth of Dominica in education for nearly 20 years now. And we can thank really one of the key founders of your organization, Dr. Gordon Campbell, certainly for my involvement and lending this program toward us and enabling us to move forward with it. Dominica is a really beautiful country. It's known as the Nature Isle. It's 27 by 15 miles. It has gorgeous countryside. It's lots of greenery, and it's just gorgeous. There's two things that strike me with Dominica. One is the country itself, and the other is the people. The people in the country, I find, have just been so welcoming for so long, and my colleagues, at least 35 of us who've spent some time there teaching, would reflect on the same. It's been a wonderful experience and a wonderful country. But some bad things happened on September 17th, 2018, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hypolite to share those occurrences with you.
Thank you. On September 17th, we had a major Category 5 Hurricane Maria, which devastated our small island, causing severe destruction to 95% of all the structures on the country, including schools and all the public facilities. Very devastating. As you can see in that picture, that is the inside of the city where the river overflowed, bringing down so much debris in that area. This is an aerial shot of what the country looked like after the devastation. And as you can see, there's hardly anything that is in the proper shape that it is supposed to be after that. Where are we located? Commonwealth of Dominica. As you can see, the white arrows will indicate to you where Dominica is located in relation to where Calgary is located. Pretty far distance away, as you can see. But you should have a very good idea in case you intend to visit there sometime. That's the distance you would have to travel to get there. On a more specific location within the Caribbean region, the white arrow indicates to you where Dominica is located among other Caribbean countries like St. Lucia, Grenada, Guadeloupe, Montserrat, and so on. So it's a chain of islands which exists there, and unfortunately, Dominica, among other Caribbean islands, are actually located on a hurricane belt, which means the likelihood of any hurricane coming within that region is going to impact the Commonwealth of Dominica or any of the neighboring Caribbean countries. One of the things that we have realized is that over the past years, there has been an increase in the occurrences of tropical storms and hurricane in the East Atlantic. And as the graph here shows you, that there's a major increase in tropical storms. You would notice in the key where the wind speed is indicated, C3 there indicates Category 3 hurricanes to Category 5 hurricanes, and Maurice will indicate to you in terms of the specifics of their speed, so you can get a better idea of that. But what you would see in the trend that we're seeing is a general increase in hurricanes, especially of the higher categories in the East Atlantic generally. More specifically, where Dominica is concerned, over the last 150 years, you would realize that based on this table here, that Category 5 hurricane was the first that impacted Dominica for the last 150 years. And you'd also notice an increase in the categories 4 to 5 over the last 150 years. So that trends kind of indicate to you the climate has changed, where the likelihood of more severe storms and hurricanes is much more possible in terms of having an impact on the Commonwealth of Dominica. Just to share with you a few of the photos which indicates the devastation that existed after Hurricane Maria. Our Prime Minister, Roosevelt Skerrit, indicated in a simple phrase that Eden is broken. It was that bad for us. So I'll just go through a few pictures which indicates to you. These are some schools here that was damaged in terms of their roofs here. Okay, you can see a lot of teaching resources were lost there. This school here lost the entire roof. Here we can only see a platform of what remains to be something of what a school was. And if you look at the backdrop, you can see the impact of the hurricane on the vegetation. This is inside one of the library areas in one of our schools. So scenes of pure devastation. Another school, which was thoroughly, almost totally damaged. And majority of the primary schools, the 65 primary schools and the secondary schools, were significantly impacted by that hurricane. Sorry. Good. So with those pictures, it means that after such an impact, devastation, there must be challenges. There are severe challenges that we are faced with in the Commonwealth of Dominica, and that is one of the key things that I would like to share with you this afternoon. Some of the challenges, the cost of repairing. So based on the damages that you would have seen, it's going to cost a significant amount to repair and rebuild those schools, infrastructure, roads, bridges, and so on. Increased temperatures, that's one of the key things that we've noticed over time. The environment, the climate in the Caribbean is so much hotter than it used to be. And especially after Hurricane Maria, then it was very hot in the sense that there was hardly any tree covering over time. So that caused the rivers and so on to dry up, and in terms of we had water shortages and all of those things. That's part of the key challenges that we have, which means there was an inconsistency for the operations of schools to go on. Based on the materials and equipment you would have seen that we would have lost in the pictures that is there, we have a limited supply of school materials and resources to work with our students in our education system at this point. And it's also very challenging, whatever was left of those resources, to maximize it or make full use of it in relation to the general population of students that we have. That is proven to be very challenging, not only for principals, but for teachers and the Ministry of Education officials also. And moreover, addressing the psychosocial needs of our citizens. How do you rebound psychologically after such a traumatic experience? For our students, that is one of the key things that we're trying to address. Our teachers, principals, Ministry of Education officials, it's important that we have a platform or a support system in place to address the psychosocial needs of our people if we're able to move forward as a progressive people. So that's one of the key challenges that we're having, because not many persons on our island is basically trained in that area. Bearing the challenges in mind, how do we address this impact? So it's not about laying there and not doing anything about it. As a people, we have to be resilient. We have to get up on our feet, and decide that we're going to have to do something about the situation that we are faced with. So how do we seek to address some of the impact? One of the things that we're trying to do is to move towards a more technology-driven approach towards education, where there's more integration in the use of technology, where information can be stored not just in a book in a library, but it can be stored on a laptop or something where the students can have access to it, even if there may be situations that there are hurricanes or storms or so on. And hence the using of more portable equipment like laptops and tablets, having external hard drives, PowerPoint projectors, and so on, things that you can easily move and store in another area if there's a storm or hurricane pending. We are also looking to move to using those, so that the situation may not be that if you can have them stored away during that time and you could easily bring them back out, then there should be some sort of continuity in spite of what we are faced with. And also, very importantly, creating a secure storage area for these equipment would be very important. So we are working within our schools to ensure that when they are rebuilt and there are secure spaces, that those equipment can be kept, that would keep them preserved. Also, very importantly, ensuring that our students are able to take responsibility for their learning is critical, because they may not always be sitting in a classroom and the teacher is at the front of the room for them. At certain points, they may have situations where within the weather environment, they may remain home at times. They may not be able to go to school, but they should also be able to see the need to take responsibility for their learning and do some learning at home, and helping them to realize that the teacher is more of a facilitator in the classroom and not just the person who's going to get them to learn. So they can take a key approach in ensuring that they learn. So we are moving towards ensuring that our students show greater responsibility for their learning, even when they're not within the classroom. Rebuilding structures, well, based on what you saw, it's very important that in rebuilding that we rebuild with high safety standards, a situation where those structures will be able to withstand strong hurricane force winds. And very importantly, one of the key reasons why I'm here, one of the areas that we're seeking to address some impact is in developing reliable partnerships with other countries. The IT Foundation for Dominica, based right here in Alberta, it has been one of those key partners with us for the past, almost the past 20 years, which have supported us tremendously. And we want to be thankful for that because we realize within partnerships as global citizens, then we can continue to be progressive in spite of the challenges that we have faced, whether it's through climate or otherwise. So Maurice, which would have supported us very well, I want to be very thankful to him for that on behalf of our country, and that partnership is a partnership that has been flourishing for a very long time. So I'll allow him to continue here as a major partner with representative of a major partner with Dominica.
Thank you, Steve. Let me just briefly share what a hurricane Category 5 looks like in terms of numbers, at least. In kilometers per hour, a hurricane Category 5 is above 252 kilometers per hour. So when we think we have strong wind here at 100 miles per hour, at 157 miles an hour, we're into Category 5. We also have to be aware at that point, because we're at sea level and because there's a lot of density in the air, the force is even greater than what we would face here in a semi-arid region. So the amount of damage you saw within virtually all structures within Dominica is a result of that. IT for Dominica Foundation, thank you, thanks Bev. The IT for Dominica Foundation was started nearly 20 years ago, and as I mentioned, thanks to Dr. Gordon Campbell's involvement and his connections with both the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Education in Dominica. And he basically served as a mentor for me and handed the project on to me after a couple of years. I had much to learn, admittedly, but we've done some pretty good work without patting ourselves too much on the back. We've educated over nearly 1,000 teachers on the island in that time. We at one point had met with 70 to 80% of all administrative staff and offered training for them. We've had 35 teachers from Alberta, and many of them from southern Alberta, teaching in Dominica for at least 2 weeks during the summertime and teaching teachers how to integrate technology. And you might ask, well, why that? If we look at young people today, it's pretty obvious it's a central element, and in learning, it's a central element. And I think we can credit both the former Prime Minister as well as Dr. Campbell for having foresight to recognize 20 years hence just how important it would become. So our project really is about fairness. We've been at this for 20 years. We haven't looked at it strictly through the lens of a climate change perspective. And let me just stay there for a minute. Why might this be related to climate change? Why might that graph be related to climate change? And I don't want to go too far down that path. But it might be related to climate change because hurricanes develop their strength, that ferocity, from water, and specifically heat in the water. The hotter the water, the more power is established. And there's also some other factors, venting out the top and so on. But before it can begin, it does need power from that water, the heat in the water. And if we're having rising temperatures in the ocean, we are likely going to face more hurricanes. And certainly we're facing more damage as hurricanes strike landfall. And if we're seeing more Category 5s, Category 4s, recently Michael, we will see more damage. So we really started with the question of fairness. Our mission, to restore and support the implementation of instructional technologies in Dominican schools. So at this point, we're very much focused on how do we reestablish technologies within the country, within the schools. Historically, for some time, we really focused on professional development. And the need was strong, and they had sufficient resources thanks to some of our initial contributions in the early 2000s, but also the European Union's contributions thereafter. Maria, as Mr. Hypolite has shared with you, basically wiped the island clean of educational resources and certainly of technologies. So we're working really hard right now to reestablish that. I like to share this photo because this is a photo of a tree in the background. Some of the students at Canefield-Massac School in Dominica, and you can see the ocean in the far background there. That tree was planted at the same time as we planted one at Picture Butte, at Dorothy Dalglish Elementary to be specific, probably in the order of 15 years ago. The tree at Dorothy Dalglish is nowhere near this big. But it was a curricular alignment activity to enable students to share how things are different in our two countries. As I said, we've done a lot of professional development over the years. We've had significant, tremendous positive feedback from our folks who have been there, and invariably they come back excited. They know they're making a difference in teachers and students' lives. And I'm looking at our colleague Darlene Huber right now, who has been down 2 or 3 times for us, and all of them have done tremendous work, and they've provided tremendous feedback. Our surveys of the folks, the teachers that they're teaching, has equally been very, very positive. You'll notice uniforms on the students, and we've done a little bit of exchanges. This is another Dominican, Mrs. Nicholas, who joined us earlier this year, just after Maria's strike. So why do we support Dominica? I mean, here we are, prairie town, long ways away from Dominica. What are the factors that draw us there? Well, I certainly mentioned the beauty of the country, the engagement of the people, and their welcoming. But there's some other factors that lend well to what we're doing. It's an English-speaking country, some French. It's kind of common with what we've got in Canada. There's a familiar policing and judicial system, so there's stability there. It's a Commonwealth country, which we're familiar with. There's a solid parliamentarian government in operation. Their K through 12 and post-secondary education will look familiar. It's more of a Cambridgian-based education than we're accustomed to, so from curricular delivery standpoint, there's some differences, but at the root of it, we're pretty similar. And as Mr. Hypolite shared with you, 65 elementary schools, 15 secondary schools, and in the last, I'm going to say decade or so, they've established a state college. So why support the IT for Dominica Foundation? Well, we believe in education, obviously. The future of Dominica is its children, and donations restore their learning to meet modern demands. We know that if students have the tools of the 21st century, they are positioned for both learning and job placement. If they have the tools of the last century, and particularly the early part of the last century, they will be ready for the last century. And knowing many of those people, my feeling is it's just not good enough. So the foundation operates on a zero administration cost basis. The folks that really believe in the project, they support the administrative costs. Donations that come into us are finding their way directly to Dominica. There's not this 18 or 20% overhead. We've partnered with an organization called A Better World, and they've enabled charitable donations, tax receipts for us. We have a nearly 20-year history in working in Dominican schools, and as part of that, we've done deliveries. We've done deliveries back in '01 and again in '03, and at one time, ironically, we were the largest deliverer of technology within the Commonwealth of Dominica into their education system. We have a clear articulation of the resources and processes necessary as a result of that to achieve success. And finally, we have a long history of partnerships. And these are some of the partners that we've had over the years. The upper section that is in boxes are folks that are currently working with us, and the folks below that are folks who have historically been involved in the project. So we've had really good support. Folks like Ministry of Education, Alberta Teachers Association, some of the school districts in the province. We're really well positioned, I'm going to suggest, in terms of professional development. We're really well positioned in terms of acquiring technologies that are quality technologies, leaving our system, for good reasons that I could go into later, but leaving our system and still have ample life in them to serve Dominican schools. So we can thank our folks in various districts for helping out on that front. What we struggle with, and admittedly, is shipping costs and some of those hard dollar costs. Melina Fontaine, the Chief Education Officer, reflected on the IT for Dominica project and said it was designed originally to improve the availability of ICT equipment for education on the island. It has surpassed the original mandate, providing not only ICT equipment, but training of approximately 1,000 teachers. Our Canadian counterparts have outlived and outperformed our expectations from its inception. The ministry is fully dedicated to supporting the partnership and totally committed to goals and directions of the project. So we've really had good support from the Ministry of Education and Dominicans as a whole. I'll leave some contact information with you. We have a website available that you can access, and we also have and I'm going to thank Darlene Huber again. She's done all of the social media work for us. So we've got a social media site, both Twitter and a Facebook account, and lots of folks out there looking at us, exploring what we're doing, and supporting the directions we're going. I would like to share just a couple of other things with you, because I've got a couple of extra minutes here. Let me go back and talk just a little bit more about the foundation's work in the early years. In the early years, we started out offering 2-week institute sessions. We would have, I'm going to say, 20, 30 Dominican teachers joining us. Over time, probably, I'm going to say a decade ago or so, we were fortunate enough to have additional funding, and as a consequence, we were able to double that. And these days, we've moved forward where we're actually bringing Dominicans, at least one Dominican each year, to teach some of our classes. So we're trying to lend some of this back to the Dominican folks themselves rather than us taking a heavy hand. One of the questions I've been asked many times, or a few times at least, has been, 20 years? Why are you still there? Haven't you finished? Our original projection was, well, we'll go down there for a couple of years, we'll install some technologies, we'll provide some professional development, and we'll say we've done a good job and we'll walk away. So I too have to ask the question, why are we there 20 years later? And it is a good question. And the answer is essentially this. Technology's changed dramatically in 20 years. I mean, all of us here know that. The big boxes, just in terms of the instrument itself, has changed dramatically into something like this. The nature of education has changed dramatically. How we deliver education itself has changed tremendously in the past 20 years. And so what we have to offer, what we need to offer teachers has changed. And consequently, we simply couldn't have walked away, I'm going to say even 15 years ago, 10 years ago, because the nature of the field has changed a lot. Dominica is in a difficult position now, given that they weren't starting with a lot. The GDP of Canada is about, roughly on a per capita basis, $50,000 per person. The GDP in Dominica is about, and don't quote me exactly on this, but it's in the proximity of $500 a person. It's a pretty big difference. So they were starting off with a difficult scenario. Once Maria struck, it made that the chance of rebuilding huge. So consequently, we want to step in. We're going to reach down and give them a hand. Our intention is not to provide resources ongoing, but to reach down, give them a hand, get them back on their feet, and then begin that stepping back process. Thanks very much for joining us today.